Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a panel discussion on reshaping ideals and rethinking policies. Can we have a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? It is indeed a pleasure to have great minds like you debate, decode, and add value to discussions on current and contemporary issues of our country. I now request Shri S.R. Mehroz Khan, Secretary of KPCC, a young political leader, a social entrepreneur, a Vision Group member, Government of Karnataka, and the organizer of Reshaping Ideals, Rethinking Policies, to welcome the gathering.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to welcome this August gathering to a candid conversation between three very influential individuals of our nation. As they discuss the significance of a culture, Indian social life, women empowerment, and economic growth and impact of media on our developing country. An intense informative discussion such as this needs an equal intellectual personality to moderate and question our speakers. I would like to invite on stage Professor M.V. Rajeev Gowda, Member of Parliament, our moderator for this evening discussion, and our panelist, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Member of Parliament and former diplomat, Shri Randeep Singh Surjewala, Head of Communication AICC, and Ms. Sushmita, Member of Parliament and President of All India Mahila Congress. I welcome all of you to this gathering.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we give them a big round of applause and welcome them on stage? Thank you so much for joining us today to be a part of this lovely conversation. I request the dignitaries to be seated. I now request Shri S.R. Mehroz Khan, Secretary of KPCC, to felicitate our panelists and to be a part of this lovely gesture that we're doing on stage. I want you to invite, I invite you to come over and give them the Namma Uru logo, the model logo of our city, which was launched a few months ago. I request Mr. Mehroz Khan to please come over. Thank you, Mr. Khan. I request everyone to please stand up for the beautiful Vande Mataram, our national song. Thank you. Please be seated. I take this opportunity to invite and request Professor M.V. Rajeev Gowda to take over the panel and begin the discussion.
Thank you, Anto, and welcome to everyone here. We are taking a break from the heat and dust of the campaign to engage with issues in much cooler climes and with a very, very different setting where we're going to engage with these topics of reshaping ideals and rethinking policies. There's an opportunity for us to hear from some of the brightest young minds the country has seen and the Congress Party is proud to have. And really, what I'm going to do is just ask them a couple of questions in the beginning and then throw it open to the audience, because the real action is when we engage with one another. Well, when I think about the changing context within which we're all meeting, there's so many forces around us. You know, the world is transforming in terms of technology which empowers people. There's a mobile phone, a smartphone in the hands of billions of people with all the possibilities that that entails. You have globalization bringing everyone together and a backlash against that at the same time. You have climate change. You have so many, the changing nature of work itself and what kinds of jobs and opportunities await us. And of course, the urbanization of the planet itself. What does that mean for rural and urban communities and their futures? So that's the sort of backdrop within which we're engaging with these kinds of questions. So I thought I'd start by asking each of our guests here one question to start with, and as a gesture to his seniority, I'll ask Shashi to begin. Dr. Tharoor, globalization and its discontents. I mean, the reason for this question to him, of course, is that he spent a tremendous, practically a lifetime in international diplomacy. And so you've observed how globalization's picked up pace, and now you're seeing the backlash, especially in America, in Europe, etc. What's your view on what India should be doing in terms of policies to cope with this, to take advantage of globalization, to reset the negativity that's out there?
Right. Thank you, Rajeev, and great to see you all here this evening. I would start off by saying it's actually not even just one backlash, but two that we're seeing against globalization in the developed world. There is the economic backlash we've all read about, where voters in the rich countries are increasingly saying, why are we voting for politicians who are sending our jobs off to Shanghai, or Bengaluru for that matter? And they're saying that surely what has happened as a result of globalization may have resulted in an influx of cheaper goods into our supermarkets, but it's also cost us jobs, we're no longer manufacturing things, etc., etc. So there's a serious economic backlash because globalization has produced winners and losers. The winners are the fat cat capitalists. The rich have grown richer in many of these developed countries. They're the ones who've made huge profits out of their revenues and their company shares shooting up as they outsource more and more jobs outside, whereas the working class has suffered. But there is also a second backlash that we don't talk enough about, though it's become increasingly apparent in the last few years. And that's what I call the cultural backlash. Because accompanying this backlash of economics is a backlash that is bitter, xenophobic, racist almost in many cases, that rejects cosmopolitanism, rejects immigration, rejects foreign influences coming in. You saw it in the Brexit vote, which is very much a vote against hearing too many foreign languages being spoken in the streets of London and England generally. You saw it in the Trump election. After all, Make America Great Again was partly code for Make America White Again. Except that, of course, the forces of demography can't be rolled back. And inevitably, whether Mr. Trump likes it or not, by 2030, a majority of the American labor force will be non-white, because the white workers are literally dying off and getting past retirement. Now, these two backlashes combined in the Trump case or in the Brexit case, they combine in the case of a Marine Le Pen in France or a Geert Wilders in the Netherlands and cases like that. but they don't combine in another phenomenon which has been happening as a result of this whole process, and that's what we've seen in both Turkey and India. Because with Erdogan in Turkey and with Modi in India, you do have them profiting from the sort of cultural backlash against globalization by claiming to speak on behalf of a more rooted ethnic and often religiously based nationalism. But they do not participate in the economic backlash. They're not rejecting Davos man, they want to be Davos man. So that is a very interesting difference between the elements of the backlash we're seeing in some of the more visible developed countries and what we're seeing in countries that were called the emerging markets. Now, what is India doing in this situation? We certainly gained a lot from globalization. We became, I must say, one of the more globalized countries on earth in terms of our connections to the outside world. The entire transformation of the IT sector was directly a result of our being able to be connected to the global economy, quite literally, through fiber optic cable and related technologies, but also because suddenly markets were open to us that we had cut ourselves off from in the past. So globalization has worked in some ways to benefit us. In other ways, however, it has not worked quite as well. For example, China, and to some degree some of the other Southeast Asian countries, cornered the market on manufacturing goods for this new globalized world, which included both manufacturing things they could directly sell to countries like America and Europe, and also being part of a global supply chain, where you might find a computer where the keyboard is manufactured in Taiwan, and the hardware shell is in China, and the Malaysians are doing the ports that connect it, and then ultimately the whole thing is being assembled in a fourth country before being shipped off under the Dell brand name or whatever to online consumers around the world. I mean, this kind of supply chain that evolved in the last generation, the last 20 years or so, we have not been significant enough participants in. We've done well in one or two areas. Oddly enough, we've become world leaders in automobile parts, mainly out of Tamil Nadu. And of course, the IT is your field, it's Bengaluru, it's, you know how that's pretty much gone. But are we now in danger of missing the boat? I tweeted yesterday my shock at the announcement that for the first time in living memory, India has dropped out of the 80 Kearney index, the top 10 FDI destinations in the world, foreign direct investment destinations in the world. Mr. Modi has been boasting about how much extra foreign development, foreign direct investment he's been bringing into India. Well, we've gone out of the top 10. We are looking at a situation where the rich countries are now more and more pulling their own money back and looking at investing in themselves. We may have missed the boat. There are other developments happening in those markets. When Mr. Modi goes around saying make in India, he's actually asking people to make things in India that they may not make through human beings anywhere. They might be using robots to do it. It's very striking that the biggest flagship announcement for Make in India 3 years ago was Modi talking about Foxconn, which allegedly signed a $3 billion pledge for a huge new hardware factory and facility in India. Has anyone seen one penny of that $3 billion? Has one hole been driven into the ground to put in a foundation? No. And it may not be entirely Mr. Modi's fault. It may be that Foxconn has said, look at all the hassles we're going to have to go through to build a plant and hire Indians and conform to Indian labor laws and everything else. Why don't we just spend a little more money in the short term, get some robots to do this, and we won't have to worry about pensions and holidays and strikes and so on. I don't know. I'm not privy to the internal deliberations of Foxconn. All I know is we heard the announcement, we haven't seen the money. Now, this means that we may have missed the manufacturing opportunity. And that's a serious crisis because growth under Mr. Modi has been literally jobless growth. You're looking at growth where he promised, as you know, 2 crore jobs a year, every year, and that would have been 8 crore jobs by now. His grand total of job creation, we've added all the numbers, is 18 lakhs. 1.8 million are the total number of jobs created in India in these last 4 years. Now, what are we going to do in this situation? We keep growing, so does our population. Young people are entering the job market every year. How do we absorb them? Do we have answers from the government? Clearly not. Do we have answers from opportunities in globalization? Maybe, but have we thought it through? Have we done enough, for example, to invest in serious AI development? It's striking, when Rahul Gandhi and a couple of us were in Silicon Valley last summer, we discovered that many of the companies in Silicon Valley that are leaders, world leaders in AI, have Indian techies doing this research for them there. Where are the Indian techies in India that are doing cutting-edge work in AI? Maybe we should be doing that. We can actually start transforming. We can see what's potentially a problem and convert it into an opportunity. I'm personally a big advocate of trying to get more tourists into this country. But that means putting serious investment into tourist infrastructure. Because we have fantastic places that are just lying, neglected, dilapidated. No one has bothered to renovate them. There are no facilities around them. And why do I say this? Because there are studies that have demonstrated that $1,000 invested in tourism will employ 8 times as many people as $1,000 invested in industry. And then you've got the whole problem of our labor. Tourism absorbs semi-skilled and unskilled labor. It doesn't take a whole lot of training to become a waiter or a busboy or a gardener's assistant. We need to have those folks come in as well. So there's opportunities there that need to be seized. But right now, I'm sorry to say, the picture has not been very good. Either because of their inexperience or because they were carried away by their own rhetoric. This government has missed the opportunity to reorient our economy in a way that would have taken advantage of the current trends in globalization. And the bus is already leaving the bus stop. We are still running after it, panting to try and catch up. But it's going. As I said, FDI is already dropping. We're not getting the investments we thought we were getting. And finally, we are not creating the jobs we need to create. I don't mean to paint a completely gloomy picture, but there's some hard work that the next government will need to do.
Thanks, Shashi. Moving on to you, Sushmita. You're a lawyer, and you've been mayor, you've been MLA, you're now an MP. When you actually look at women in India's workforce, right, we actually see women dropping out of India's workforce. Have you thought about what's going on and what we need to do to fix this real challenge?
I think it's a very valid question, and it's something we've been struggling with, I think, over decades. And my friend Salman Soz is here. He's written an excellent piece just on this for the All India Mahila Congress website, which is going to go up this Sunday. And I would agree with him that there are various factors because of which we have lesser women in the formal sector. But ironically, if you look at the unorganized sector more closely, it's primarily made of women. So women are actually being pushed into the unorganized sector. Women in the rural sector, the proportion or ratio of women who work in the rural sector are higher. And I think the reason behind it is the need to work, as opposed to looking at it from the perspective of women being empowered and being pushed into the formal sector. I personally believe that this is not a challenge that just India faces. There are lesser women in the formal sector, even in many Western countries. I'm sure there's enough data out there. And I strongly believe that one of the main reasons that happens is because women are relegated or are victims of gender roles. You know, our roles are defined in society, whether we like it or not. And what hurts me the most, I'm sorry, but I have to bring up the fact that I feel very strongly about knee-jerk reactions to situations like this, and policies which are not well thought through and come as tokenism, and because of which it actually makes women more unemployable. And the reason I say that, I mean, Dr. Tharoor will agree with me, it's really a pleasure being here, because sometimes, because of our small number in the parliament, we can't actually air out these views, which is our primary job in the parliament, is to air out our views on what we feel. And to take a small example without taking more time, like the Maternity Benefit Act. Yesterday, Prime Minister Modi spoke about it when he spoke on women's issues. but my views are very different on the Maternity Benefit Act. Although I strongly believe that a lactating mother must have flexible working hours. There's absolutely no difference of opinion on that. But if you study the law in some of the European countries where they do allow you the Maternity Benefit Act, where it gives you 26 weeks off, or it gives you certain hours off at work, or it gives you the option of working out of home, all of this is actually backed by the government by a kind of a financial contribution to that sector. So effectively what this government has done is push this policy about maternity benefit, but according to me it's made a woman more unemployable in the formal sector, because there is no contribution from the government. So when you look at a 23-year-old who walks into your office and you're interviewing her, or you're interviewing a man, a boy who's 23 years old, is bound to cross your mind that how much is she going to cost to the company. So these are the kind of measures we don't need in the name of women empowerment. And I can go on and on about it when it comes to this government, but for two reasons. One, I'm partisan, and the second reason, and I think the more real reason, is that I don't believe in women empowerment which is about tokenism. I feel very strongly against it. So gender roles, policies like this, regressive social norms, a patriarchal society, all of these cumulatively, I think, make the scenario about women being in the workforce grim, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening. So I'll join Dr. Tharoor in saying that it's not like it's not happening. It's happening, but since you asked me, in my opinion, these are some of the reasons why we have lesser women in the workforce.
Thank you.
Rajeev, before you leave, Sushmita, one question though, Sushmita. If something like the Maternity Benefits Act, which I must say as a naive man I was rather sympathetic to, if it involved the government making a 50% contribution, would you support it? In other words, if every company was obliged to provide the benefits listed in the Act, but the government had to pay 50 or reimburse the company 50% of the costs so incurred, would that be acceptable? Obviously, the company would still have some burden, but not.
See, I have absolutely understand that it's our constitution which says that women and children can have special provisions. So it's our right. I don't look at it as an entitlement. So flowing from that, if a private company has to pay 50%, that's I think that's my right, my constitutional right, because it doesn't amount to discrimination, as you know. But if 50% comes from the government, it actually incentivizes a company to say it's not so bad. You know, so Dr. Rajeev Gowda did an excellent paper when this bill came to the parliament, what you circulated, and he's given some very good examples all over Europe where this legislation has come through with some contribution from the government. And it has worked. But whether it will work in this country, I mean, we'll have to wait and see.
No, this is a real challenge because there's already discrimination at the time of hiring. And then, of course, the real challenge of re-entering the workforce after having taken time off to be with family. I mean, that's another huge challenge. There's some interesting measures that have, being experimented with right now.
But these are rights that women in government offices have and government PSUs have. So what Sushmita is talking about is the burden on the private sector.
Yeah,
Turning to you, Randeep. While the speakers before us have been members of parliament, you've been in the Haryana legislature, you've been a minister there, you've been able to see the ground realities in a very, very different way. Held a variety of portfolios. Well, we're both farmers, and I want to ask you about the issue of agriculture and agricultural distress. Are there ways out where farmers can benefit, where consumers can benefit at the same time? Can you envisage win-win situations? The Karnataka government has come up with a few. I can elaborate, but I'd rather ask you about your views and insights.
Well, is it one Gowda to another?
The Jats are the Gowdas of Haryana. Yeah.
Or the other way around, you might say.
Coming back to, if you look at agriculture, I think, let me pick up a cue from what Dr. Tharoor and Sushmita said. 60 or 62% of this country is still engaged in agriculture. That's a reality you can't wish away. Whatever may be the liberalization, modernization, formalization of sectors, I don't think so you can wish away this harsh, hard and clear reality. So let's begin there. What's wrong with agriculture today? What can be right are primarily two questions you ask. Prices that are market driven and remunerative is what farmer wants at the end of the day. It's a very, very simple solution. What did UPA do? If you look at the entire chart, and Professor Gowda and AICC communication and Congress President himself the other day tweeted about it. If you look at the entire tenure of UPA, why did markets in urban area grew? Why was there more money in hands of everybody? Why were all the consumer industry growing? The reason was there was more money in the pocket of a person in the rural area. And how was that done? It was done because the net increase in the MSP of essential crops was anything between 15% to 300% in many cases. And we both have seen those charts. Dr. Tharoor has seen those charts. What has gone wrong? Mr. Modi gives an increase of 2% to 3.5%, 4%, which is below the inflation rate. So last 4 years have seen the agriculture debt rise, for I don't get as a farmer the produce of my farm, which is not even equivalent to the cost what I put in. Net even minus my labor, I'm making less money. So I'm putting 100 rupees and drawing 95. Then if simple question is, why am I still doing it? There are no other jobs. What else? I don't know. I'm not skilled. I'm telling you from a farmer's point of view. He or she does not know what else to do. They have nowhere else to go. That's the real story of millions and millions of India's farmers, more than half of whom are women. Two, at any point of time, about 60% of our land is not irrigated through a regular source. So there is about half of our agriculture is rain-fed or weather-oriented. Many states have done great things. For example, I must commend your state. What Karnataka has done over 5 years is remarkable. And what your vision statement says is even further remarkable. The kind of infrastructural investments that they have made and they seek to make, there are areas of Karnataka which are as fertile as Punjab or Haryana, and there are areas which are really arid and sad. Farmer deserves an equal treatment everywhere. Are we investing from Government of India's point of view enough in agriculture, in creation of infrastructures, both for irrigation and power? The answer is clearly no. Prime Minister has left agriculture as a responsibility of the states. So Government of India is investing less and less. When third thing that directly arises is the weather calamities. I mean, there will be rain, there will be hailstorms, there will be dust storms, 100 people will die, but we don't realize how many 1,000 acres are also lost, consequently livelihoods lost. So the norms for award of calamity relief, which Government of India during UPA time increased by about 300%, have largely remained static for 4 years. Not many people in this room would know that. Also the Fasal Bima Yojana that he launched with great fanfare, and we have data for Kharif and Rabi 2016-17, it only ended up giving, while you and me and each one of us in this room pay an agriculture cess, Mr. Modi uses it to pay to 6 companies, only 2 of which are now PSU after intervention by Congress President, rest 4 are private. 80% of the business has gone to 4 private insurance companies. They paid out a claim of 6,000 crore and pocketed a profit of 14,500 crores. Great business. Why should you and me also not do it then? Because it's at the cost of everybody in this country who pay agriculture cess, and some is paid by farmer, some by the states. Last but not the least, every crop, I understand as a farmer, cannot have an MSP. There are cash crops, there are multiple other types of crops that you will have to sell to the market forces. What do you do for them? Also for crops which have MSP. For example, I think you grow ragi in Karnataka. You also grow some amount of paddy in Karnataka, which is really common right up, right from up Himachal to down up till Karnataka. There are 2 kinds of, and I'll just take a minute more, Professor. If you can export the same amount of, there are some variety of paddy which will have an MSP, like PR varieties, but a 1910 or 1510 or basmati will not have an MSP. When government used to push exports, farmer would get better price. Just to give you an example, we grow basmati typically, which is one of the finest varieties of rice. It got 6,500 rupees a quintal when UPA was in power. No MSP, market driven. Because we managed to export to Iran, we also managed to export some to Syria, we managed to export to Iraq, and most of these Arab countries, the UAE and other countries. The price is down this year to about 3,000 rupees. So I've lost 3,500 rupees a quintal. Same goes for different varieties of basmati which were designated so by painstaking efforts of Dr. Manmohan Singh, and Dr. Tharoor was part of that cabinet. Now comes the GI status. Most of the countries are now refusing to accept paddy. What is Mr. Modi doing about it? Well, we are only bashing some community or the other. That's all that we are doing. So what is the net result? Your exports have gone down by 10 million US dollars compared to 2014. And your imports have gone up by 10 million US dollars. 10 billion US dollars compared to 2014. So farmer has lost 20 billion American dollars in 4 years. 20 billion American dollars which would have been in the hands of the farmers. That is what ails it, and that is what needs to be corrected.
Well, the real challenge has been that the imports have come in at a time when, for example, dal harvests have been very, very good, and you suddenly see a glut of imports coming in and prices really crashing. The nice thing is, in Karnataka, when you look at what our government's done over the last few years, the unified market platform, the Niti Aayog reports that our farmers' incomes have gone up by 38% because all the mandis across the state have been linked. Traders are able to, actually compete across the state. You know, those sorts of initiatives. And our own experience with dairy, with horticulture, has been that as urban growth picks up, as urban food tastes transform, there are huge opportunities for rural India as well. And that's the kind of vision we must really pursue, look for win-win situations going forward.
I just want to add one thing. I think Karnataka is a model state, and not because it's a Congress government here, in ensuring that the market forces come to the aid of farmer rather than they cost him dearly. Let me give you an example of one more state, and one of my colleagues who does elaborate research on it, Abhay Dubey, he's here. He pointed out to me and I was shocked. I'm from Haryana and UP is next door, which is anyway the biggest state. UP is the biggest grower of wheat in India. I did not know that. I used to think it's Punjab, Haryana. UP only procures, I think, 4%, and please correct me, Abhay, if I'm wrong. About 4% of the total produce that farmer produces. So what happens to the remaining 96%? He never gets 1700 rupees for it. He will probably get 1300. Somebody will buy. They will come and sell it in Punjab and Haryana at a profit of 400 rupees. So we actually have more crop in Punjab or Haryana or Delhi mandis than we can ever produce. And that is because someone is buying from UP farmer, is just transporting across the border and making 500 rupees extra. That needs to change. And it's a state which is central procurement on responsibility state. But the number of mandis have gone down, the amount of procurement has gone down, and the state government has abdicated the farmer or by a chief minister who comes and preaches here.
If I could get Randeep to add two more things. One is the agricultural credit system is broken, right? I mean, how do we fix that? Because there are too many farmers. Last year, 7,600 committed suicide, and it's almost always, because the burden of debt is so crushing. What can we do to fix that? And the other is, how should we improve our agricultural infrastructure to ensure that, for example, cold storage, transport of perishable goods from one part of the country to another where they're valuable, etc., can be done in order to increase the profits for farmers?
You ask actually three very relevant questions, so let me answer them one by one. Farm to plate is a very catchy word, but it never happens in this country. We lose about 40% of all the vegetables and fruits we grow because they never reach.
We apparently, the more fruits and vegetables destroyed in India every year than the entire continent of Australia grows.
Let me give you an example. Prime Minister today took a jibe by saying that you want to convert potatoes into gold. But I don't think so Prime Minister ever grew potato. If he did, he would know that they can be turned into gold. They can be, and I'll tell you how, because I'm somebody who grows them.
My favorite golden French fries.
Both potatoes and onions, they have a cyclical nature. Anybody who in Belgaum or Hubli will tell you, up to Sholapur, that one day the rate is 10 paisa a kg and one day the rate is up to 100 rupees a kg. These volatile conditions of the market. So if the same potato or an onion was selling at 100 rupees a kg, it is converting it into gold. What else is it then, right? The question is the farmer getting the price? So farm to plate remains a challenge. For that, states and center need to come out with a new procurement paradigm. And what is that? While you procure the top 10 crops at a defined MSP, you give to state, the central government, and the state government allocates a certain amount, what we call the price cushioning mechanism. If the price of my potato goes beyond 10 rupees a kg, then the State Agriculture Price Commission should be able to define, well, in Karnataka you grow these 6 other crops which are not MSP crops, but they are important crops that farmer grows. This is the minimum level of income that farmer should have. The day it goes below that, the state should start buying. Till then you don't intervene. If somebody is getting 30 rupees, let them get, why should I spend my money as a state? So what Prime Minister sometimes called bhavantar. Bhavantar is nothing but price cushioning. Price cushioning is an extremely important mechanism that has to be partnered by states and center. It will take care of a lot of this volatility. Number 2, what the Karnataka PCC and the Congress party has today declared, in their manifesto, for the first time they say they will build an agri corridor through 10 subclimatic zones of the state, whereby there will be a module of agri-businesses directly benefiting the farmer in marketing his or her produce right at his doorsteps through a series of cold chains. I think that's the way forward. I think what we must compliment Mehroz and Professor Gowda, what the Congress party is doing here and what this government is doing here is the way that every government will have to emulate sooner or later. So you create agri corridors like you create a Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. And you create those and you go through those climatic zones, and many states don't even have many. And you create need-based market production and procurement. I think that's one way forward.
Well, we've already taken quite a bit of time, but before I go to the audience, we are all working to get the Congress back in office in 2019. I'm confident that will happen, and I'm also confident that when that happens, all three of you will be members of the cabinet. What would your preferred portfolio be? What would your top priority be? Top policy priority?
Now, I think none of us is going to answer the first question, because obviously it's presumptuous to assume that we will be there, and it will be even more presumptuous to express a preference, because we should do whatever the government of the day gives us a chance to do. I mean,
You've already been there, Shashi. No.
Yeah, so if I were to answer, I'd answer on one of the two portfolios that I have worked on. Obviously, foreign affairs has been a passion of mine, but it's obviously much more dependent on an international environment than on your saying we'll do this, we'll do that. We can say the obvious things: we'll improve relations with the neighbors, we'll fix the dysfunctionality with China, etc., etc. But that's a different issue, and one can deal with it according to the complexities of the day. But since I did work on HRD, and I see at least one educationist here I've met and others, I think we need to address education as an urgent national priority. I didn't have very long in the ministry, alas, but I already found myself saying during my first few months there that I see education not just as a social challenge, but as a national security challenge. We are in a situation where we have 220 million young people in sort of the last years of their education, from the ages of 12 to 19. Are we educating them properly, and are we equipping them for the opportunities and challenges that await them in today's world? I have to say that my fear is the answer is no. Already the ILO came out with a report last year that in the job starting age group of 19 to, sorry, they go 15 to 23, but it's mainly 19 to 23. The figures that I saw from the ILO were, we will have 116 million young people. The Chinese will only have 93 million. So in theory, we should be the next sort of workhorse engine, the dynamic, youthful labor force for the entire world. But that means, of course, you have to train and equip these people, either through an adequate education or through skill development training. And both of those have unfortunately not taken off anywhere, neither under us sufficiently. To our credit, we diagnosed the problem, we came up with an approach, then we got turfed out of office. The BJP has wasted these 4 years on these two issues. Skill development has gone absolutely nowhere, despite their creating a dedicated ministry for it. And as far as education is concerned, we've been hearing talk about a new education policy for 4 years. There were even consultations with MPs at one point a couple of years ago. Nothing has emerged. All we see are leaks in the newspapers about how the Mahabharata must be taught as history, and how Rana Pratap really won the Battle of Haldighati, and so on and so forth, which is not the principal preoccupation one should have in education. So if you ask me, Raji, what would the priorities be, I'd say first, we need a serious overhaul of education policy. Second, we need really to fix the regulatory system. We'd come up with the beginnings of a scheme to essentially dismantle the UGC, the AICTE, and create a body that will focus much more on accreditation, which de facto would leave to the universities the autonomy to decide what they're wanting to do. That's essential, it seems to me. Third, we need to put more resources in, because what we are not doing right now is emphasizing sufficiently on learning outcomes. What we've got instead is schools and colleges being told, you must have X number of classrooms, you must have X number of teachers, the classrooms must have this size, you must have a playground. You're not saying that your kids need to be able to do this or that. And now we're having internationally recognized tests saying that 5th grade kids in our country, only 40-odd% can do simple mathematics at a 2nd grade level. Now that is going to be a disaster. We've got elite education, which is as good as the best in the world, and perhaps your children go there and you don't see this as a problem, but we have this vast population that is not benefiting from these opportunities. And you know what I believe is the national security problem. What have we seen in the 165 districts where there have been Maoist incidents, small or big? 165 out of our 625 districts have had Maoist incidents in the last 5 years. These are essentially undereducated or uneducated, unemployed and essentially unemployable young men, and in some cases women. And they are the ones who are vulnerable to the blandishments of an ideologue with 1,000 rupees and a Kalashnikov, because they have no stake in our economy or in the future of our system, because they have no place in it. And they know they'll never have a place in it. Now imagine if that population multiplies by a factor of all these young people coming out of a broken education system in the government sector and with an economy that isn't generating jobs. That's what I mean. We'll be staring at a full-scale national security crisis, and it'll be internal. It won't be coming from Pakistan or China. That's why education is so massively important, and I would give that major priority and major resources. We were heading in the right direction on resources, not fast enough, but the excuse was since GDP was growing, though the percentage wasn't growing fast enough, the amount of money coming in was larger. That's not true under Mr. Modi. GDP has dropped by 2.2%, but the allocations for education have been slashed. In these circumstances, we need a serious rethink, and that means putting in money, focusing on outcomes, transforming regulation, and looking very seriously at the big picture.
Well, couldn't agree with you more. And let's turn to Sushmita, your policy priority.
I'm glad you rephrased that question. I was wondering how to answer it. I have to admit that the best years of my political life have been when I was the mayor of my town. I mean, that's where all the real work happens. And as I fought my election for the assembly and then the member of parliament, I realized that I'm more of a policy maker now. But my 4 years of experience as running an urban local body, I have to say that I have a lot of interest in urban development. And I hope that I can work in that area. Although most people come from constituencies which are primarily rural, most of the members of parliament, and rural development attracts many people. But I believe that urbanization is one of the biggest challenges we face in this nation. And like Surjewala ji said, whether we like it or not, 65% of India is in the rural and our economy is agricultural, and it poses a big challenge. But I also feel that the kind of challenges an urban area has is also something we need to look at very carefully. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting because when the Modi government came up with the concept of smart cities, like I was so excited about it till I read the fine print. And I kept praying to myself that my town doesn't get selected as a smart city, because nothing would come out of it, because it's simply unaffordable for smaller towns. You know, it's only viable for a very, like a DLF kind of an area where there'll be, Wi-Fi and everything is going to be privatized, the way the norms go. But the Amrut, the other scheme, which is Amrut, which has been renamed under our regime, it was called the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Mission, that project which is called JNNURM. That's where the real promise is. But I can tell you, the reason I think urbanization is a real challenge and we have not been able to make any difference and is very easy to have a top-heavy policy. You can impose a smart city and an Amrut or whatever from the top. But the question is, when it comes to implementation, we fail miserably because there's no capacity building at the level of urban local bodies. So I remember when our government was there and I was the mayor of my town, I used to come very often to Delhi, where Shailja Kumari ji was the Minister of Poverty Alleviation and Urban Development, we used to have consistent trainings going on, so we knew how to implement these projects. I don't see that happening anymore. And I hope, I mean, Bangalore is a city which has many issues, and Dr. Rajeev Gowda and I did a similar session way back in the month of January, and many people raised those issues. And I'm happy to see some of the promises that have been made in the manifesto. I mean, I don't want to repeat them, but I believe urbanization is a big challenge, and the kind of migration that is happening from the rural to the urban poses one of the largest challenges this country has. And if I were to delve into policy making, and if policy were to emanate from my desk, I would like to be in the urban development, I won't say ministry, but the sector. Thank you.
Well, one thing I must point out, Bengaluru has had a tremendous history of engagement of citizens with policy development, and even JNNURM was inspired by the experiences of Karnataka during the SM Krishna years under the Congress. And then when Dr. Manmohan Singh took over, our policy entrepreneurs from here went to Delhi, and that's how the whole urban agenda really became one of the centerpieces of the UPA's flagship policies.
I want to just quickly add, I think Bangalore's performance is pretty good, because every time money comes from these schemes, they are all actually World Bank funded. So it's all connected to reforms. So you don't actually get your final release unless you've made those reforms like digitization and other due diligences. And if I remember correctly, Bangalore is one of the top cities that has actually enforced those, actually implemented those reforms, which are the conditionalities in the World Bank loan to India for JNNURM. So, you know, it is a challenge, but some cities like Bangalore has done it, but I think most of the smaller cities have not done it. And that was the whole idea behind JNNURM. So anyway, I just thought I'll add that. Thanks.
What's the plan, Randeep bhai?
Professor, I would say I think while the challenges are multiple, the first and foremost that any new government should be doing is to travel the distance from rhetoric to reality, and from dialogue to delivery, from jumlas to sincerity, and the solutions will follow. I think we as a country must realize सब चलता है नहीं चलेगा. Number two, we need to invest in projects that do not necessarily get you immediate credit or votes. For example, an irrigation scheme takes sometimes mostly close to 10 years to build. You need to invest your money there. Number two, let me pick up a cue from what my friend Sushmita said. Solid waste disposal, sewage disposal. I'll tell you something, Dr. Tharoor. Right from Srinagar down up to Mumbai, there are how many towns, I have worked in the drinking water and sanitation sector. Do you know there are how many towns who treat all of their sewage? One. The city I represent. No other town represents. The reason is that we throw all our... Delhi only treats 30% of its sewage. When we give Yamuna water to Delhi, Professor, we give it at about 6 to 15 BOD. And we receive it back, it's at about 7,000 BOD. If you ever looked at water in 6 of Haryana districts from a helicopter, it's black. It's nothing but Delhi sewage that we use. It's all poison. All land has gone. People have cancer because the national capital. Some of the UP sludge will come, and then the Yamuna will enter Haryana again, and finally it goes to UP. I think drinking water, recyclable water, solid waste management, sanitation and waste disposal, as also treatment of all 100%. One target should be by 2030, every small and big town in this country should have a sewage disposal plant with 100% cleaning of all sewage that is coming in, and some of it getting recycled. It'll transform this country, and that's one of the major challenges of urbanization. How much efforts can you spend on tier 2, 3 and 4 cities? I may have Bengaluru, I must develop it, I must not let it rot. But what happens to all the other smaller cities of Karnataka? Small towns. For people are continuing to migrate because there are not adequate facilities there. Also, the entire challenge of pricing of agri products. Also, building up so many MSMEs and like the tourism sector, which are force multiplier, which generates employment for not so employed, not so employable people, not so literate people, and finally tech and innovation. We have to be the lead country in the world. So you need to have the best. You need to have a job for an 8th standard person, and you need to have a job and an opportunity and a vision and a career path for somebody who's very, very tech savvy. So you need to invest into the future of technologies, and well, you can't be a software power forever. You are already, that's getting eroded. So that's a major challenge for Bengaluru. Are we going to ride the next bandwagon? But that's a question that I suppose needs to be found in this city more than ever. So there are multiple challenges, and all of them are achievable. They look formidable, but we can overcome them. And I think it's all about leadership at the end of the day.
Thanks. So now we're going to change the game a little bit. We're going to open it up to the audience. But on both sides, I'm going to request all of you to keep your questions very crisp and pointed. And I'm going to request all of you, in the interest of taking more questions, to keep your replies crisp and pointed too. All right? So can I have some hands?
That will depend on the questions.
Siddharth Raja, go ahead.
Thanks, Professor. If the gentleman, the photographer, can move, thank you. I have two short questions, sir, both directed at Dr. Tharoor. One is hopefully not too controversial because it's on the foreign policy front. But firstly, and I just wanted to get your inputs on something that you mentioned about, the skilling. I once told Professor Rajeev Gowda that the only skilling I knew of was a gentleman called Jeff Skilling who went to prison because of Enron, right? Apparently, a few days ago, there was a news report that a new higher education bill is floating around, talking of the merger of several of the UGC and the rest. Is that an attempt to hopefully go down the route that you were talking about? Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet, no. You
haven't seen it yet. Okay. And then my next question is from someone who in 1991, who was the icon, for world peace and for all that she represented. What would you say if you were to meet Aung San Suu Kyi today on the Myanmar government's treatment of the Rohingya Muslims?
Okay, so the first one, we don't know what the government is doing on education, but if they actually do come up with something, it will probably go to committee first before it comes to Parliament. So when we see it, we'll look at it, and we'll look at it with an open mind. I am not one of these people who says everything that comes out of the BJP must be bad, and certainly I applauded, for example, their decision to go through on something we had initiated to grant autonomies to the full autonomy to the IIMs, where the minister has even relinquished his right to appoint the head of the institution. That's actually a terrific thing that many of us did not expect the BJP to follow through on. And they've done it, and I stood in Parliament on behalf of the Congress Party and said, I congratulate the minister. We want to be constructive if they do the right thing. So we'll look at the bill and we'll come back to you. On the Rohingyas in Myanmar, it's a very sad situation. I have met Aung San Suu Kyi. I've spoken to her. I was a big supporter of hers when she was in prison. I have met her late husband, who came to see us at the UN to tell us about her situation. She in many ways is an authentic heroine of resistance, of indomitable will and courage and all that. But having come to power now, she has disappointed a lot of people with her stance on the Rohingyas. Now, there are two explanations for this. One is that she herself partakes of the Burmese narrative that sees these people as essentially foreigners and not as, minorities within Burma. The strange thing is that the Rohingya population goes back at least 150 years in bulk, when, as usual, but the British colonial rule, people were moved in from what is today Bangladesh into that area of the Arakan coast. But there was actually a Muslim minority going back to the days of the Arab traders in the 7th century and so on. So to treat the entire lot of them as foreigners really begs the question of when does your national identity start and how do you treat people fairly. The second aspect is, however, that the constitution of Burma imposes some fairly crippling limitations on her. Because all issues of foreign policy and national security are actually the domain of the military in Burma. And the military has the constitutional right to overthrow the civilian government if they feel the civilian government is not doing the right thing in these domains. So there is also the explanation being advanced that she believes that the more important issue is the consolidation of civilian rule and democracy in Burma, and that she doesn't want to take a stand on the Rohingyas that might please international opinion, but might displease the military and could end up costing her not only her government, but also the civilian, the return of civilian rule. Whatever the reason, and both of these reasons may be partly true, maybe fully true, maybe one is more true than the other, but whatever the fact is, this has meant that her policy has not been terribly humanitarian when it comes to Rohingyas. And as you know, a lot of backlash has occurred. There are calls to strip her of the Nobel, but that will not happen. However, she has been stripped of certain other honors, deprived of honorary degrees by some Western universities that had awarded them to her, and that sort of thing. And she has not reacted publicly to any of that. I think if I were to meet her in private, I would want to understand better her motivations for the stand she took, because she has a worldwide reputation as an icon of human rights, and find out whether it really is the sort of majburi of what happens with the military, and that she just said, I had to choose between preserving my country's civilian democracy and strengthening it and helping it to grow, versus standing up for these people whom I don't think are fully Burmese anyway. If that kind of answer comes, I will understand. I may not applaud, but at least I will understand. As you know, in India, we don't have any of the excuses that she would seemingly have, and yet our government has threatened to deport the 40,000 Rohingya refugees we have, which would be a betrayal of about 2,000 years of Indian history, where we have played host, as Vivekananda ji boasted in Chicago, to every conceivable refugee movement that has come. And we are still proud of being host to the largest single refugee movement in human history, the 10 million Bengalis who came over in 1971. Since then, we have hosted Sri Lankan Tamils, we have hosted more Tibetans coming in, we've hosted Nepalese fleeing the civil war, and Afghans, Iraqis, Africans of various sorts have sought refuge and been given it. What is the matter? Well, very simple. These Rohingyas are Muslim. And for the BJP, that's enough to deem them a national security threat. I'm sorry, that isn't good enough. We have to stand up for the values of our society, of our constitution, of our tradition, and our culture. And we have to oppose this. The government should not be allowed to treat the Rohingyas that way. And as I say, they don't have the excuses that Aung San Suu Kyi has.
Thanks. Yeah, Sriwali?
Do you think the corporate funding of media has affected its neutrality?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Do you think the corporate funding of media or takeover of media has affected its neutrality?
Well, not only corporate funding, the parliamentarization of media has also affected its neutrality. Considering how many media barons are now in parliament, and considering how partisan they play, yes, it has. The answer in one line is, across our country, most media is now owned by 5 or 6 business houses. When I say it doesn't mean all, it means 80% of your media. More of visual media than print media. To say all journalists are not independent would be wrong. Dr. Tharoor could own my newspaper or my electronic media channel, but that never deters me from speaking truth to power. Also, last 4 years we've seen India is perhaps one of the most dangerous country to be a journalist. About over 150 have died. So please also look at from a news person perspective as to how difficult it is to be a journalist in today's world when, quote unquote, your owner is a member of parliament or indebted to the government on account of some governmental contracts. B, your editorial control is many times being directed by way of slips sent every morning, now through WhatsApps, from Prime Minister's office. In Delhi, we've seen, and Professor Gowda and Sushmita is a witness to that, every morning, most electronic media channels receive a one-pager. This has to be your agenda. It's written, typed and sent to them. You will find, so one day just check all Hindi and English channels. You will find the topic of the debate is word to word the same. Tell me across 300 media channels and more newspapers, how can the topic of discussion be identical? Same thing happening at 6 o'clock, same thing. I know it because we deal with about 50 debates a day. And I only have 3 topics on a given day. Out of those 50 debates, many times I have 2, many times I have only 1. So you get a feeling it is dictated. And I have seen those slips because one or the other friend always passes it on as advance information of what you are about to be hit by. I think media is under as much attack as judiciary is. Judiciary is under as much attack as citizens are. Citizens are under as much attack as the young are. Young are under as much attack as perhaps minorities are. Minorities are under as much attack or more, perhaps what my friend here says women are. So democracy, my friend, is in peril today. And those are challenges which go way beyond political parties. And I think each one of us needs to think things through and rise up in our own way, in our own community, in our own city, in our own ward, by speaking out. All I will say, speak out or democracy will be dead in this country. But let me tell you, there are millions and millions of Indians, and not all congressmen and women, and large majority of congressmen and women, who will fight to their last breath the onslaught on our freedom. So it's freedom which is under attack.
Rajeev, can I just say something? This is a question that is now recurring in many programs, and I'm happy that obviously there is that feeling amongst people who are not necessarily at the political class. But you know, there's something that has to be said about the way Parliament is being run. I think it's far more dangerous what's happening inside Parliament than what's happening in the media. Because see, you can say whatever you like in the media, there is no record of that. So 10 years from now, I mean, it doesn't matter what a channel said about Rahul Gandhi ji or about anybody else for that matter. But Parliament is something that 50 years from now you can actually go to the library and see who said what. And what I find, I'm a first-time parliamentarian. Dr. Tharoor is very senior and he's been in the Parliament long enough. But I am appalled at the way parliamentary procedures run. And one Nirav Modi held the entire session, last session, to ransom, where finance bills were passed. Like, I have, that time has come that people have to start understanding what parliament means, what the importance of parliamentary procedures, what nuances are, because it's not about suppressing my rights or Dr. Tharoor's right or Gaurav Gogoi's right. We enter the parliament as your representatives. And what is going on in the parliament is much worse than what's happening after 9 o'clock in the thing. And I want Dr. Tharoor to say something about that, because you're in a better position as a senior parliamentarian. People have to understand this, what's happening in the parliament.
You're totally correct. I think to begin with, everyone has been to blame in terms of the disruption that's been tolerated. Most democratic parliaments would not allow this kind of nonsense where parties just storm into the well of the House and try and hold the entire procedure to ransom. What is worse, what is in fact unprecedented, is what we've seen in the last session, where the government itself has encouraged disruption by proxy, because the only people disrupting the last session were allies and friends of the ruling party. So disruption, to begin with, must be outlawed. Yet there has evolved a culture in the last 20 years in our parliament where speakers are told that it's actually undemocratic to prevent disruption, where our present finance minister wrote an entire paper arguing that parliamentary disruption is a legitimate form of politics, and so on, with the result that parliament as a place where you can debate and argue has been colossally devalued. The second thing that Sushmita is absolutely right about is that we don't have enough debates. The fact that the government can actually push a finance bill through without a debate is unforgivable. There is no parliamentary system where that could even be accepted. But somehow they have got away with it, and sadly we have chosen not to challenge that in the Supreme Court. Many, many bills are not discussed anywhere. You can have a serious discussion in a standing committee and then bring it to a vote and have a discussion. They haven't done that. Very often, without discussing in committee, they railroad it through the House without any serious debate either. And laws are being made that way, in which the elected representatives of the people have not really participated. The parliamentary system itself has many flaws, and I've written about that. I won't talk about it. But while we have it, we have to run it as it's supposed to be run. And to my mind, one of the shocking things we see, for example, is that once the government has established its crushing majority as a result of the election, it is impervious to any influence. You can move any reasonable amendment you like to any bill. You'll even find members of the BJP nodding in assent that what you're saying makes sense. And then, when the time comes to the vote, the whip is cracked, and immediately the government's version gets through without any serious change. So, how are laws made in our country? I must say, Sushmita is totally right. They're taking place without proper debate, without serious in-depth understanding, and often without meaningful political participation. This has to be changed.
I'd just like to add to that quite a bit of legislation has passed, including constitutional amendments. And that's happened because we've all been cooperating, unlike what the ruling party did when they were in opposition over the years. Anyway, the next question's coming from...
Yeah, I have...
Who has the mic?
The mic in my hand.
Yeah, go ahead.
Gentlemen. My name is Riaz Basha, and I belong to Bangalore, grown up in this city. First of all, thank you, Mehruzji, for having people like us part of this debate. And warm welcome to our city, to all the dignitaries on the stage. Having said that, there are some of those things that need to be addressed immediately. One of those is the safety of women in the country. We see a lot of things happening these days, but nobody is actually putting things to measure. They're not saying these are the... If I were to ask anybody who is a member of parliament or MLA or anybody, nobody would be probably able to put 3 or 4 things together to say these are the exact things that we will be doing. So I know the next weekend by now we would have elected our government here, and this is also a very important election for Congress, I suppose, because this will also be the lead up to the Lok Sabha elections next year. So if you were to come back to power next year, okay, of course, we've all made our mistakes as human beings as well. We do make mistakes. What are your learnings from your past many years of ruling? What are you going to do differently this time around, including the safety of women? If you can just highlight a couple of those things for us to take back from here, please.
We sort of did, didn't we? Your first round of questions to us was precisely highlighting what we felt needed to be done better, Riaz. I mean, these are things that, in some cases, certainly I only spoke about something I actually had worked on in government. Randeep clearly knows agriculture inside out, and Sushmita is talking as leader of the Mahila Congress, who spent a lot of time focusing on the issues of women. So these are all things that are priorities for our country. There's no shortage, there's no end to the list of things we could talk about. If you could be a little more specific than something you want to hear
I'll make
about
it more specific, sir. Without being disrespectful, I'll make it more specific. We have for example, we have something very nice as zero tolerance in our traffic signal in Bangalore. We're very, very proud of that, because I think it's one of the very few cities who has zero tolerance. We have the zero tolerance zones where no vehicles can come on crossing those barriers. Similarly, could we have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to women's safety? You know, we have something more specific that we can take back from here.
I don't know. I really want one of the men to answer that. I mean, I have the answers, but I want to hear it from you.
I have a mic to work. Give it to me. Look, I think it's absolutely clear, yes. I don't know how zero tolerance would work in practice, because you have to have due process, you apprehend the wrongdoer and so on. But what's more important, there are two things. There's the basics of how to prevent attacks on women. We do have to enhance patrolling. People don't realize, for example, that we have the lowest police to population ratio of any country of any significance in the world. It's ridiculous. We need to have far more policemen and policewomen. We need to have them on the beat. We need to equip them with scooters, vehicles so they can patrol. We need to have better street lighting. These basic things will cut down dramatically the number of assaults that take place on women. But there's a larger issue. We need to change mindsets in our society. We have created a culture, and it's getting worse in recent years, where this kind of patriarchy has come about, where men seem to think that the fact that they worship women as goddesses sometimes, or as mothers at other times, means that any woman who doesn't conform to those two ideals is fair game. They're comfortable with the idea of praying to a female goddess. They're comfortable with worshipping their mother. But the moment they have to deal with a woman who makes her own decisions, goes out where she likes, when she likes, with whom she likes, they have a serious problem. They can't deal with it. And that's partly because we have not trained men sufficiently, going right down to school level, in understanding how they should behave in society and what the rights of the other gender are. So the problem lies in a whole lot of men not understanding that the mere fact that a woman is going out to work, or is alone out at night, or is out with a boy at night, or whatever, doesn't suddenly make her an acceptable target for your frustrations. And the problem is that there are very many men who don't get that, because they've been brought up to think that women can only be in this exalted position and not at all otherwise. So unless we start creating serious gender sensitivity, I mean, when I was in HRD, we were discussing the idea of actually creating compulsory instructional materials on gender issues to be taught to very young boys at a very young age, before they start getting locked into this patriarchal mindset that sadly infects much of our society. So both those, take concrete, practical preventive measures, so more policemen and women, more patrols, better street lighting, more CCTV cameras, all of that stuff. And secondly, but also before that, change mindsets through education. Go right ahead.
I just want to say one thing. Sorry, I'll just take only 5 seconds. I'm saying, like, every time Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao is trending, I was telling my Mahila Congress colleagues that we should actually start saying Beta Padhao. It's not Beti Padhao, it's a women. I mean, men are a threat to us. You know, so I have actually decided from the Mahila Congress to, you know, start a entire social media campaign and a campaign on the ground saying, apne bete ko padhao.
Beta padhao, beti bachao.
Yeah. My name is Pallavi Idor. My question is, currently the developments are concentrated on metro cities. What is the plan if Congress government has come to power in 2019? What is the plan for Tier 2, Tier 3 cities development?
it can't be answered right here on this stage, because see, what biggest challenges we face is, let's look at the difference between Cuttack and Bhubaneswar. Bhubaneswar is a planned city, Cuttack is not. The biggest challenge that we face in most of the tier 2 and 3 cities are that they are very old, they go back 150, 200 years, maybe more, and then to convert it into a planned city with the due, sewage system, with solid waste management, like Surjewala ji said, it's not easy. So if it was left to me to come up with planned cities, I would look at greenfield projects. That's what I would do. And I think that's a part of the plan. That is a part of the plan as was announced by the NDA government. But I don't know a single one that has happened. Like, I live in Delhi, in the outskirts of Delhi, in a place called Shanti Kunj Farms. And behind my terrace, there's a sign saying, this is where the smart city is going to come out. And there's not a single piece of brick there till today. So I don't know what's going to happen. But to my mind, I agree in principle that if you want planned cities, you have to move out of the already existing cities. And you have to encourage people to move out of the overcrowded cities. Otherwise, there's absolutely no way you can give the quality of life that we want to give. Which means that we have to think in terms of land banks, etc., etc. But it's an interesting question. And I can tell you this much, that there's one practice Congress has started in the last, since the Gujarat elections. We've done it in Karnataka also. I think it's an excellent idea, and before it was more restricted to within the party. But what we are planning to do before the 2019 election is, whatever we write in our manifesto, we're going to engage with the people. Go to a city to know what the people of cities want. Talk to women activists or feminists to say, what is it you want in terms of women's rights? Talk to young people to see. So for everything, all the questions that have come towards us is that what would we do if we came to power? But Rahul Gandhiji's vision is the other way around. He says every manifesto must be a people's manifesto. It can't be about what Shashi Tharoor and Sushmita and Surjewala want. You have to talk to the people. And we are going to do that in Karnataka too. We have done it actually with Mr. Mahila, and in Gujarat, Sam Petruda did it so well also. So, I think it's a correct forum to say that before the 2019 elections, we will actually hear people out as to what they think should be done with women's security or urban development or whatever the other issues that impact the lives of the people.
I'm going to start asking for questions in bunches, and please keep them crisp. We have a very short time left for us. Anand? Oh, Lavanya?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Lavanya, and I have a question. What is Congress Party's course of action to improve women's participation in politics?
Okay, that's one. Give the mic. Okay, Anand, just go ahead. Yeah, right here.
Yeah, my question is, in 2019, we assume we are going to win. I know we have a lot of plans for governance, but is there any plans for tackling the poison, the ideology that's been spread over the last 5 years? Because I think that is the crux of the problem.
Okay. Jyotsna?
I've got the mic. Sorry.
I'll come back to you.
Me? Yeah, thanks. See, on the name of public-private partnership, one sees, especially in last few years, one has witnessed rampant growth of commercial, completely unregulated privatization. So it's not only about privatization, but it's about commercialization, and in every area, be it education, be it health, be it agriculture, on the name of crop insurance. What is Congress's, and leading to very, very dangerous consequences, very, very dangerous consequences, the kind of consequences Dr. Tharoor is mentioning. And even when you talk about skills, the skills for the poor, actually, it may not be said, but that's what it is. We are doing a very in-depth study, and that's what we are finding. and very high-class art education for the elite, and that kind of, I mean, that's the symbolic. That's what you see everywhere, be it health, be it agriculture. So, but it has become much more blatant in the last 4 years and of high magnitude. If you really go, the seeds were sown in UPA too. So what's Congress's position on that for future?
Anyone wants to field crisp answers to this?
On the women's participation, let me just answer that for Lavanya. I mean, let me tell you, it's a challenge for every party, not just Congress. And it's a very big challenge for the president of our party to actually bring more women into the electoral system. And frankly, the shackles are too many, the obstacles are too many, because politics is so competitive. And honestly, frankly, in taking over as the Mahila Congress president, I have first-hand experience of how capable women are not given nominations. It happens at every starter and every party. So the way I look at it, it simply has to be imposed. And Congress president is crystal clear, and my friend here said we are coming to power, and I guarantee you that we will bring the 33% reservations. Will you be rest assured? And that's the only way forward. Because I actually have no other answer for that, and I see no way of actually creating that space for women unless it is imposed on every political party.
I do agree with Sushmita. On the other two questions, I'll start with yours first. I cannot say that we would ideologically object to the involvement of the private sector across the board. That's not realistic, simply because, unfortunately, the government does not have all the resources needed to tackle all the challenges we're facing. To give you one example, we talked about skill development. I challenged the private sector to get more involved in vocational training. Why shouldn't these companies, with their vast amounts of money available, set up training centers in their fields, in their own industries, train more people than they need, but thereby generate a surplus capacity of skilled labor which others can recruit? They can take the cream of the crop because it's their institution. But not one of them, I mean, no Reliance, no Bajaj, no Tata, no one has come forward and started setting up vocational training centers attached to or nearby the big factories, the big industries that they have. Why should it always be the government's poor old labor ministry with its little, labor training things, often using out-of-date equipment and old lathes which are no longer in use in any factory, and you're training some poor chaps, a surplus labor in the agricultural world to operate this equipment that you've had since the 1950s? It's tough. You're not going to actually solve the problem that way. So why can't the private sector come in? So my answer is, yes, we are against commercialization for commercialization's sake, but we cannot be against the involvement of the private sector, which actually ought to be doing more. I mean, I was initially, for example, troubled by my own government's decision to make CSR mandatory, corporate social responsibility. It turned out to be a very, very wise move, because as Sushmita said, a lot of things in our country only happen if you have to do it. And when companies were told you have to invest 2% of your net profits into socially responsible welfare activities, whether you like it or not, a lot of money started coming into good and needy causes, and a lot of people have got help and benefit from it. So you can enlist the private sector into the service of development. That would be my answer for now. On the larger question of privatization and so on, by and large, the Congress's traditional policy has been that we believe the public sector has a place. There are still some areas for discussion and refinement, and I can't presume what the policy, what the manifesto will finally say. But on this question, that we have some room for private sector involvement in all the development sectors of our country, I think we should allow that space. Your question is fundamental. In fact, it goes to the heart of what our dilemma is today, because what's going on is not just a battle between two political forces or multiple political forces. It is a battle for India's soul. We have had over the last 70 years a certain idea of India. I know the phrase which Tagore came up with has been a bit overused and perhaps is seen as a cliche, and now the BJP keeps saying, who gave you a copyright on the idea of India? We also have our own ideas of India. But the basic idea, which has gone through for 2,000 to 3,000 years, is of a country which a lot of people of different backgrounds, religions, appearances, languages have contributed to and have built up together, and where everyone has therefore been having an equal stake and enjoyed equal rights as a result. Now suddenly you have a completely contradictory view that challenges the very basic spirit of what India is all about. I'll bring it down to one very, very practical thing. The ideologues of the Hindutva movement, and notably and most recently Deen Dayal Upadhyay, whom Mr. Modi reveres, and Mr. Modi has said that every ministry must hold seminars on Deen Dayal Upadhyay's thought. What they did, principally Savarkar, Golwalkar and Upadhyay, was they rejected the Constitution of India. And they did so for two very clear reasons. The first, they said, well, it's full of Western ideas written by Anglophile lawyers in the wrong language. Sure, we can deal with that. Good translations are available. But the second and most serious problem is, they all said, and Upadhyay said it clearest and in most detail, that the Constitution of India should be scrapped because it rests on a wrong premise of what is a nation. The Constitution, he says, assumes that India is a territory and all the different people on it. That is the nation for which the Constitution has been written. Wrong, he says. He says a nation is a people, and the people of India are the Hindu people, and the Constitution should be written for a Hindu Rashtra. Everybody else is here on sufferance as a guest or a bandit or a dacoit or an interloper. That is the fundamental, if you like, cleavage of attitude between the BJP approach and ours. Now, you start with that and you realize, well, how are they going to get there? They need three things. They need a two-thirds majority in the Rajya Sabha, a two-thirds in the Lok Sabha, and two-thirds of the states. Actually, half the states is enough to ratify a constitutional amendment. Now, what do they have? They have 22 of the 29 states. That means automatically within 4 years they will have two-thirds of the Rajya Sabha, because the state assemblies elect the Rajya Sabha. All that is keeping the India we have known for 70 years alive is the prospect that they will be defeated in the Lok Sabha election in 2019. Because unfortunately for them, they didn't have the Rajya Sabha during this time, so they couldn't do in the first term what they've all been itching to do, what Mr. Anand Kumar Hegde publicly proclaimed they would do. He said, we have been elected to change the Constitution. Well, after 2019, if they're back in power, and they then also get the Rajya Sabha and they have the states, they will change the Constitution. You can take it from me, Mr. Govindacharya is already sitting in a closed room writing a new Constitution, and it's not going to be something that many of us here will recognize as the India we knew and we cherished and valued. So if you really want to defend the soul of India and the future of India, you have to do everything in your power to ensure that the ideology, this dangerous, divisive, bigoted ideology, does not get an opportunity to fulfill its worst fantasies, which it will do if it gets a repeat of 2014 and 2019. The challenge before the nation is nothing less than that.
Who have the mic? You have the mic, and somebody else here has the mic. There was a gentleman there. Who had the mic here earlier? Okay, that's fine. Now, I'll take your question. Anshul, you want to have a question? No, after him, and then the lady here. I thought there was one more chap there who had a mic. Okay, 4 of you, and that's it actually. It's already been quite long evening. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my name is Bharat. We are the bunch of professionals here, comes from a talent management domain. We have a couple of ideas, if we implement those ideas, unemployment can be eradicated to a greater extent. One of the programs we are implementing in one of the constituency, and our goal is to make the constituency 100% free from unemployment. So my question is, we are the professionals, how can we engage with the government when they make the policies? Is there any platform for us where we can also engage and contribute for the policies?
My question is directed more towards the urban development and the complex issues that we are facing today in our cities. We spoke about it for a bit. So the thing is, I don't know, it's just my 2 cents, I don't know if there's enough research and enough professionals that are being involved, and I want to congratulate the Congress in that respect, that we do have a professional wing of the Congress. But, so thank you for that, that's a huge... Sure, I will as well. But coming back to the urban issue, the thing is, one thing is for us to do the work that we're doing, but the other thing is for us to, for the Congress to invest in research and development on each of these ideas that we may be formulating. And I think it's very important that we look at those aspects because, we have a great platform that can take things forward, but if we cannot implement these things without enough funding and without enough research, these are just things that we would be talking about without really knowing if they are actually true.
That's for you to answer.
My question is for Dr. Tharoor. Kind of going back to your point of, our education system needs a big overhaul, which I completely agree with. But I want to ask you, with automation, with robotic automation happening, as per a McKinsey report, there will be about 800 million jobs displaced by 2030, and this is globally, not just India. So, what steps would the government take? Would the Congress government take? And I know you spoke about education overhaul, but in a country like ours, do we need to focus more on vocational training, more on less skilled training? And that kind of worries me because, then there are robots coming in to take that work. So just want to hear your thoughts on kind of, what would be the steps.
Thank you for taking my question, sir. My question is with regard to the upcoming election in Karnataka. There are over 1.4 crore youngsters in Karnataka who are on the internet, who are using digital mediums and social media to actually express themselves. As an individual who's going to be voting, I'd like to better understand the body of work that Congress is doing, and so that I can make a wise decision of who I want to vote for. Is there something that the Congress government is essentially trying to do that I can leverage on using social media to better understand what you do and make a wiser choice? And just want to sort of understand that from your opinion. Thank you.
So what I'd suggest is that we carve the questions amongst ourselves. I'll jump in and just answer the research question. Anshul, the basic, we have a research department in the Congress, and
Rajeev heads it.
And if you're not on our mailing list, we'll get you on it. So the basic thing is we do 3-4 kinds of work. One is parliamentary support, and certainly they've used our work. Another is we work on election campaigns. That's where we're cooperating with communications and social media, data analytics, all the newer divisions that Rahul Gandhi has been nurturing. And we also work on ideation for the future. However, so far, most of our work has been so intense in terms of keeping up with what's going on. We have come out, with reports like the real state of the economy, things of that sort, which are fairly high-quality critiques of how the government functions, things of that sort. We came out with a report on demonetization that was the basis for protest rallies across the country. But ideation for the future is something that we need to do much more of. And so what I would suggest is a collaboration between our wings, where you organize, you're an architect, you organize consultation on ideation on issues related to urbanization and planning, etc. And this can all feed into our own platform going forward over the next year. So I'll stop there. Randeep?
I just want to add a line to what Professor Gowda said. As he spoke about the research leads to professionalism, which is the AIPC, and finally leads to communication. So now you know where the cycle ends, that's all. I wanted to make that point.
There's a question about media, how are we going to convince the youth?
Okay, I think if a young friend at the back wanted to ask that. You basically wanted to ask, if I understood you correctly, as to what are those policy paradigms that the current government, Congress government in Karnataka is setting up that helps you decide on where you want to be, which side of the political spectrum. Instead of going into a long winding speech, I will say if you checked Mr. Siddaramaia's Twitter today, there's a short movie that we put up that explains the entire vision statement of what we want Karnataka to be like. I would request you to look at it, and I'm sure that will answer your question.
But also, can you suggest a website that they can...
Well, I would suggest Namma Sarkara. Just check out Namma Sarkara. You'll see the range of policies that the government has come up with. Those that have worked to eliminate hunger, those that have focused on pregnant and lactating mothers and are going to change our ratios of infant and maternal mortality. Look at our Department of Innovation and Technology and the kinds of Elevate and other kinds of startup-focused programs across the board. But also, just look at this, right? This branding of Bengaluru, and the part in red basically says be you, right? So our focus is on letting you be you, on freedoms. And this is in stark contrast to our leading opponents who focus on, you know, who focus on anti-Romeo squads and other such policy innovations, who focus on what you're eating, what you're wearing, who you're talking to, and that poison is something that we reject.
And beware, the head of anti-Romeo squad is nowadays in Karnataka. The Bhogi Adityanath.
He's gone back to UP with his tail between his legs today. But in fact, there's a lovely WhatsApp video going around. You probably all get these forwards, which actually illustrates this very well. You know, it's a fairly short clip where you've got some girls at a dress store looking at dresses, and these goons march in and say, you can't buy this dress, it has no sleeves. They're saying young people ordering beef at a restaurant being told you can't eat that because we won't allow you. There's a girl talking to a person of another religion, and these fellows slap him and her saying, how dare you do this? Now, and this is essentially the India they wish to create, and it's not the India that most of us want to live in. So we really will have to remember, and I hope you'll see this film because it's very short, it's less than 2 minutes, but it makes the point extremely vividly and effectively. This is what we have to fight against. Since I have the mic, let me quickly respond to those two other things. First, the answer to your question is we have created a platform within the Congress party called the All India Professionals Congress. Just go on professionalscongress.com and you will find that there is a very easy sign-up procedure. You can join. The computer will automatically assign you to a chapter depending on which address you give. And according to that, whichever Lok Sabha constituency you wish to hail from or be active in, that's where you can start getting already very active. We have a number of chapters in Karnataka, including several in Bangalore, and I'm really hoping that you will have an opportunity there to meet like-minded professionals, to exchange ideas and views, to have an opportunity to convey your ideas to the political leadership and so on. So it's very much a platform that you can use, which we're very proud of having created. It's still relatively new, it's not even a year old, but we are trying to get it up and running across the country. Right now we have about 42 or 43 chapters in 19 states, and they're growing every month. So we're looking forward to having a real network of professionals across the country that will work together and reinforce this. As to you, ma'am, you know, it's a difficult one to answer because everyone is going to be grappling with answers to the same question. How do we train relatively unskilled people in an environment in which most repetitive mechanical jobs are going to be done by machines and robots and so on? One part of the answer, and I'm not pretending it's the whole answer, lies in service industry. Similarly, a robot can serve you your drink on the poolside, but it'll cost too much. It's much cheaper to have a young boy bring you your drink on the poolside, and hotels will therefore engage them. That's why I talked about tourism, I talked about wellness, I talked about service industries are generally areas. Sadly, for example, many countries in the world, people are aging. It'll happen to us too. We are in the last generation of the demographic dividend. After that, we too will age. And then we need to have caregivers, professional, trained, able caregivers. We might already be considered a nurse exporting country. We could be much more than we could train people who can go out and actually fill this demand elsewhere in the world. Again, a robot can't do what needs to be done to help old people. That's one kind of example. I mean, we can sit down and think of 10 other examples instead of the 3 or 4 I've given you, but service industries are definitely part of the answer. But we can't escape the need for some manufacturing. And in fact, one of the things the UPA was able to do is bring manufacturing up to about 17%. But that's it, we're stuck. The NDA announced in its last campaign it will go up to 25%. In fact, manufacturing has gone down. It's dropped from the levels where it was, and certainly manufacturing at the very small and micro level got a body blow from demonetization from which it's not recovered. Very many small, 3-person, 4-person little machine shops and so on have shut down because they depended on liquid cash on a daily basis. They were literally living day to day. They had to close. There is an association, the Indian Association of Manufacturers, an IMA, I think it's called IMA, which has actually done a very damning and detailed report that the government is doing its best to suppress. Please look it up. It gives you chapter and verse for the number of enterprises that have had to shut down and the number of people who have lost jobs. So manufacturing is in bad shape, and frankly, it's got to be a priority of Congress to revive it where it can. Some things can never be restarted once they're gone because the people who did them have dispersed. But some things we'll have to do, because without manufacturing, just employing labor, manufacturing at that level where a robot is unaffordable. See, a robot is an expensive thing. Your initial capital cost for a robot is not cheap. So it's only the really big guys who can get robots. What we can do is help encourage manufacturing at the small scale and micro scale level as well.
Any last responses to anything? Any last thoughts? Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Meros, our host.
I'll only say, I'll end with the line, there is a lot of hope out there. And there are a lot of challenges. Many friends pointed out challenges from urban development to education to be part of the tech or not to be part of the tech, what kind of opportunities will be there, manufacturing, what kind of societal divide is there in the country that's affecting. So I think this entire hall reflects the range of challenges that exist out there. All that we want to say, Congress party does not know all the answers. We want to learn. We want to learn from the people who have problems. For the solutions also lies with those who have problems. We can only say we will work sincerely and with absolute sincerity to change Karnataka for the better, as also change this country. I think that's where it's a partnership between people and the government. That's the way forward.
Thank you, Dr. Tharoor, Sushmita Devji, Surjewala ji, and Mandinamaga Professor Gowda ji. Then I recognize the presence of Srimati Geeta Reddy, former Minister from Telangana. Thank you, Madam, for coming. Gaurav Gogoi ji, Member of Parliament. Soos ji, our National Spokesperson. And Suraj Jagde ji, and Shabina, Ram, for Ram and Raghu. Mr. Chaitanya from Bihar. And my friend Om for Om Phase 1 and team for this wonderful setup. Mr. Anshul and all Ashish, Mr. Baswaraj, my team members, and I thank all of you for joining this wonderful evening and wonderful conversation. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to the end of Reshaping Ideals and Rethinking Policies. A big thank you to everyone present here today. We invite you for dinner that is being served, and hope you have a wonderful evening ahead. A big round of applause to all the panelists and this wonderful session. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.